Nachfolgend machen wir weiter mit Troublemaker Number 3, Marc Morano. Er hat einen Bachelor in Politikwissenschaften an der George Mason University absolviert. Er ist Chefredakteur und Chefkorrespondent für den Blog Climate Depot, ein Projekt von CFAC ebenfalls. Er hat 2009 den Blog gegründet und wurde von amerikanischen Magazinen ausgezeichnet mit dem Titel Die Nummer 1 im Internet, wenn es um die Wahrheit hinter der heutigen globalen Erwärmungshysterie geht. Morano stellt sich schon seit Jahren mit den Fragen des Klimawandels auseinander und beschäftigt sich damit, reiste 2007 auch nach Grönland, um die Behauptungen rund um die globale Erwärmung zu untersuchen. Hier haben wir Marc Morano mit der Wahrheit über die Dekarbonisierung.
Thank you very much. Thank you. As you said, I'm Marc Morano, and we're going to talk about the Great Reset and the merging of climate into that agenda, the merging of climate change into the public health sphere, which is what's happening in the global community. They want to add climate change as a public health threat. And Craig gave an excellent demonstration of the whole history of this. I just wanted to add one thing. I got involved. I was always, in the 1980s, I was a Ronald Reagan volunteer. I got involved in the environmental aspect of reporting as a journalist and as a analyst because of the 1982 Rio Earth Summit with Dixie Lee Ray on Rush Limbaugh's program in 1992. I was always concerned about the Amazon rainforest. I was watching National Geographic, the Hollywood movies, and it was Dixie Lee Ray on Rush Limbaugh, which CFAC, I didn't know Craig, I didn't know CFAC, that really opened my eyes. She was talking about the Amazon being the least endangered forest on the planet. It actually led to me doing a documentary on that about 6 years later, where I went down to Brazil multiple times. We got the environmental scientists screaming about the guidebooks for Amazon, about the forest disappearing, saying this is bullshit, bullshit. And even the New York Times admitted, for every acre of rainforest cut, 50 are being regenerated. People are now leaving the jungles, moving to urban areas, and you don't see those rainforest concerts and all that anymore because climate has consumed everything. So I'm with CFAC's Climate Depot. These are my books, by the way, Shameless Self-Promotion, Green Fraud, what you guys we call it the Green New Deal in Europe, you call it the Green Deal. Politically Incorrect Guide to Climate Change, and the Great Reset deals with all of this, and it's a post-COVID March 2020 book that deals with the merging of that public health and climate, which I'll talk a little bit about. First of all, let's talk about the EU elections. This is Politico, road rage. The EU's plan to ban gas cars may be the key to the stunning results. Let's hope that, I wish there was even more in EU, but let's hope this is the first pushback to this criminal net zero agenda in the US. People don't like you in the EU. People don't like you messing with their cars. Europe's climate ambitions thrown into doubt as the green vote collapses. James Taylor mentioned that the Green New Deal was temporarily halted before these elections. A lot of that has to do with the angry farmers spraying manure, animal manure, on the headquarters of EU is perhaps one of the best uses of manure I could ever think of. And that made a big difference. It halted the Green Deal. Rise of the right threatens EU net zero ambitions. And they'll say it's the far right, and they've addressed that. You know, they make it sound like it's the rise of Nazi party again with anyone pushing back against this agenda. This is Politico. Europe's green takes a beating. Is the US next? We can only hope so. And that's why Donald Trump right now is so important. It's so bad in the U.S. with the climate agenda, meaning it's become so absurd that RFK Jr., who I interviewed in 2014, he wanted to jail climate deniers at a New York City climate march. This has gone viral. The campaign reached out to me. They asked for the unedited. He's been asked about this in every interview. He has had to retreat and apologize for wanting to jail CEOs of energy companies, climate deniers. He thought it was treasonous to deny the science. Let's fast forward. He's now running for president. He declares climate change is being exploited by the World Economic Forum and Bill Gates the same way COVID was, top-down totalitarian controls. It's another crisis used to strip mine the wealth of the poor and enrich billionaires. That's progress. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. from jailing climate deniers to literally saying, I won't talk about climate change because it's been hijacked. And this was the major environmentalist in the United States. Internationally, we've silenced his voice on climate change. I shouldn't say we silenced it. We've convinced him. He's been red-pilled that it's been for totalitarian control. This is major progress. The Washington Post is admitting, amid explosive demand, America's running out of power. And this is as we go down this net zero Joe Biden agenda. And artificial intelligence, regardless of what you think about it, whether it's going to be used by the World Economic Forum, UN for all this control and taking away human jobs, the one silver lining of artificial intelligence is it's going to have massive power demands to the point where Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock, admitted at a World Economic Forum conference in April that solar and wind cannot possibly power the artificial AI intelligence demands because we're going to need fossil fuels because they're intermittent and unreliable. It got BlackRock to admit that renewable energy is not so hot. And that is one of the good things about AI. The Atlantic is still pushing them. They're not going to die. They're not going to go out without a fight. This is actual headline, actual article. This is what academia is doing in America right now. Is America ready for degrowth communism? And there's a whole story about a Japanese academic, how to solve climate change is to essentially impose degrowth communism. Now, for decades, we've talked about degrowth, planned recessions to fight climate change. And of course, when COVID came along, what was that but an experiment to see what would happen with the economy? And it actually worked. And the UN said the year before COVID, we need to reduce emissions about 7%. After COVID, with the global lockdowns, CO2 emissions reduced 7%. They actually called it. But none of this is about the science. Rutgers University professor, to save the climate, we need to give up demand for constant electricity. So when you hear about intermittent electricity and, oh, we have a power, we're working on the net zero agenda, it's not an accident. It's not a bug. This is a feature of what they're trying to do. They want us psychologically to not expect power when it's available. Would an occasional blackout help to solve climate change? Los Angeles Times just last summer proposing planned blackouts to meet climate goals and to solve climate change. UK power chief, era of constant electricity ending, says the power chief. And we're going to have to change our behavior and consume energy only when it is available and available cheaply. They're psychologically preparing us into that crisis lockdown mode. Instead of focusing on more energy, we restrict it. And this is the chart, America running out of power. And look at the power projected for America here. And again, AI is a big part of this. It's going to be massive. Solar and wind, of course, are not green. Save the trees, screw the trees. That's the difference. And I always ask, where are the 1970s Volvo driving, save the whale liberals when you need them? And they're not around when we're talking about offshore wind and decimating whale species. Building solar and wind requires 10 times more mine materials than fossil fuel. In fact, an excellent documentary by a mill called Juice, solar and wind power to make one wind turbine, 900 tons of steel, 2,500 tons of concrete, 45 tons of non-renewable plastic. And this is my favorite from Mark Mills, 500,000 pounds of materials to produce 1,000-pound electric car battery. So the idea that these are green energy and we're saving the planet, and of course Craig Rucker mentioned how this is based on slave labor as well, and we're trying to get states to acknowledge that and put that into their portfolio. Wind is failing despite subsidies, mandates, and the most interesting thing about this is EVs are great and solar and wind are cheap and they're readily available. If they're so great, and if EVs are so great, why do they ban the competition? Muhammad Ali was the world heavyweight champion. Imagine when he went up against Joe Frazier, I am the greatest of all time. He used to chant. What if he right before the fight said, hey, I am so great that I'm banning Joe Frazier from the ring because there's no reason for me to fight because I'm the greatest of all time. He would have been laughed out of the sports world, but that's what's happening with green energy. It's so great, but hey, we have to ban the competition. We're going to restrict fossil fuels, ration them. We're going to ban gas power, petrol cars, but it's the greatest of all time. It's the biggest bullshit of all time. That's what they should be saying. All right. Science and climate go woke. Identity politics invades the science of the climate change debate. I'm not giving you hard data today. I think James Taylor did an excellent job on that. Craig Rucker gave you the history. Let's look at this as the silly part. Toxic masculinity is the reason for climate change. Why do we have carbon taxes and all these mandates and banning? Let's just put a tax on toxic masculinity. We could solve climate change. This is Forbes magazine. NASA scientist Dr. Kate Marvel links climate change to white supremacy. Oh, that's right. It has nothing to do with CO2 emissions. It's all about what race is causing this. We'll never head off a climate catastrophe without dismantling white supremacy. Calls for climate and racial justice. Once we get climate justice and racial justice, climate change goes away as an issue. This is a NASA scientist. White men are the super spreaders of climate denialism. That's right. We are a virus, white men apparently, of denialism. Why climate change is inherently racist. Well, let's ban climate change if it's so bad. It's racist. Climate change divides along racial lines. Could tackling it help address long-standing injustices? And this is my favorite, Professor Jonathan Turley, University of Rhode Island. This is where you send your kids off to college. The data is racist. Science, statistics, and technology is inherently racist. They're all racist because they are developed by racists who live in a racist society, whether they identify as racist or not. 2 + 2 = 4 is racist because a racist came up with the mathematical equation. That's the science of 2024. It's not new. 1846. This is my friend Tony Heller, who does real climate. It's real climate science. He's changed the name. Real climate science has done the greatest archival work of anyone in this community going back centuries. 1846, Australia, the Aborigines blamed bad climate on the introduction of the white man in Australia. They were the original woke crowd, the Aborigines. The great changes that have taken place in the climate of Australia, all the testimonies, the Aborigines say climate has undergone the change since the white man came in the country. So there you have it. White supremacy caused climate change in 1846. And we think we've advanced scientifically, technologically, and culturally. Using fear to steamroll the agenda. So I'm going to talk about the collapsed rationing of energy, food, and water, by the way, transportation, free speech, property ownership, financial system. I won't get into too much of the financial today. I'm just going to touch this. One of the things they try to do is the permanent crisis mentality. This is the BBC historian. His name was Luke Kemp. Phenomenal. I featured his analysis in my book. Abuse of emergency powers happening in Europe, happening in the United States, happened in Canada under Justin Trudeau, happened in Australia. This is a long history going back thousands of years, marked the descent of the Roman Republic in Rome to the centralization of power in the Middle Ages, to enrichment of previously oppressive regimes such as Chile, apartheid. The entire Third Reich occurred during a state of emergency that lasted 12 years. 9/11, COVID, and now climate emergency powers. As the greatest in the history of mankind, the greatest abuses of human rights and freedom have occurred during these centralized power, emergency power declaration. The 2001 USA Patriot Act, along with we're still living under the 9/11 Emergency Power Act, allowed the U.S. to become a surveillance state. And there it is. We're still living under this 9/11 emergency powers thing. And this just gives this is how we now have angry school parents at school board meetings being declared domestic terrorists. This is one of the reasons in Canada, Justin Trudeau was able to declare the Canadian trucker, the Freedom Convoy, as domestic terrorists for the first time ever under the Canadian Emergencies Act. Right now in the United States, Senator Schumer, the Weather Channel, everyone's urging Joe Biden to declare a national climate emergency. This is a couple years ago. Every year, Bloomberg just came out. They're still considering it. There's a possibility he might do this before the election to shore up his base, to show he's serious about climate change. The Center for Biological Diversity says Biden would add 130 new wartime-like emergency powers if he does it, by which to bypass democracy. You don't need no stinking vote of any legislator or parliament if you have a climate emergency. Just like COVID, most consequential decisions of our life, school closures, church closures, stay-at-home orders, vaccine mandates, canceling of weddings, funerals, medical procedures, without a single vote of any legislator anywhere. It was all declared an emergency, and for decades, they'd loved China's one-party rule. You had the pages of the New York Times, Tom Friedman. China's got enlightened leaders who can bypass the messiness of democracy. Christina Figueres, the World Economic Chief, the CEO of Apple, Tim Cook, has all praised China's one-party rule. COVID gave them one-party-like rule. It made the once free West copy China's one-party rule. And that's what they're trying to do with these public health emergencies and with the COVID emergencies. So people say climate lockdowns is a conspiracy. In fact, a lot of the European press has come after me for talking about climate lockdowns. International Energy Agency's net zero report urged behavioral changes to fight climate. Now listen to what they're asking for. A shift away from private car use, upper speed limits, thermostat controls, limits on hot water. And this is International Energy Agency, the major establishment organs. Absolute Zero, this was a UK-funded report, UK fires, urged climate lockdowns, stop flying, no new roads, airport closures, stop eating beef and lamb, stop doing anything that causes emissions, which includes breathing, and I'll get to that in a little bit. Regulate carbon dioxide, what humans exhale, similar to asbestos. This is, again, and by the way, the sad part of this was debated in the UK House of Lords. I pored over the transcripts. The UK Conservative Party never once, in any of these transcripts, in any of the floor debates, challenged the premise behind net zero, challenged the premise behind the climate crisis. Instead, they argued, well, we all, of course, are concerned about climate, but this report might go a little too far. We've got to do better. Europe has to do better. You need to change the narrative and come after the climate crisis claims, both scientifically and culturally and everything. Do not accept, oh yeah, we face a problem, but we just want less of the solutions. And that's the problem that they're trying to now impose on Republicans in the US through a lot of different groups. Journal Nature. COVID lockdowns are the key to begin personal carbon allowances. Restrictions on individuals that were unthinkable only a year before, this is 2021, have us more prepared to accept tracking and limitations to achieve a safer climate. It's a merging of climate change into public health. Climate lockdowns. British Medical Journal, the once esteemed journal, calls for meat dairy hikes to fight climate change. Meat consumption must fall 80%. Fewer journeys by car. Changing behavior for net zero. This is now a public health medical concern. It's no longer an academic climate science debate. You see what's happening here. COVID response is a template for climate. 230 medical journals. The greatest threat to public health is climate. They declare COVID-19 response, i.e. lockdowns, mandates, complete shutdown of society, as the response template for climate change. The Great Travel Reset. Traffic filters, 15-minute cities. By the way, if you ever want to know, James Taylor mentioned the fact checkers, and they're typically these young reporters right out of college. They actually provide a lot of good information in some of these fact checks, because what they usually do, it's a sleight of hand. They get some absurd claim that someone might do in a meme on Facebook, and they'll say, oh, well, people are claiming this, but that's not true. And then when they tell you what is true, typically it supports everything that we've been trying to say about it, but they bury that in the article. So they'll say fact check false, and then you look at it and everything you said is true. I've talked about these 15-minute cities. People say, oh, that's a conspiracy theory. If you read it, in the case of Oxford, I think it's like 94 times a year or something in the low 90s. You're allowed to leave. After that, you start paying fees to do it, and they can change it at any time. In a year, 2 years, 3 years. Craig Rucker mentioned how the non-binding Earth Summit Treaty later became binding, or they're trying to make it binding. So these are frightening things. Council seeks to cut car use, placing strict rules on car journeys to meet net zero. Limits on movement. Airline climate restrictions. We already are living under a climate lockdown. France, 2023, banned short-haul flights, 2.5 hours or less. There's proposals EU-wide to come up with similar things to limit air travel. Bloomberg News, no more cheap flights is the new reality for climate change. And why would that be for travel? Because of climate compliance laws are getting stricter. They're slowly making airline travel the venue of the people for the people who can afford the seaside vacation, the second home, the wealthy class. The average person is going to get more and more expensive as they continue this sustainable fuel, all the mandates on travel. CNN, 2023, just last November. It's time to limit how often we travel abroad. Carbon passports may be the answer. Don't worry, they're going to be voluntary. The government will monitor your travel in a official government digital carbon passport and keep track of your travel to limit you. You see where this is coming? A climate activist said you can only fly in a declared climate emergency unless it's morally justifiable. That was Eric Holtheis. And think about it. You want to go to the beach, unless you're going for a funeral by plane, the government bureaucrat who has to rubber stamp your trip may not approve. If you're going for a beach trip, you've already hit your carbon allowance. Your passport won't allow it. You won't be able to travel. This is the world they envision. And by the way, this is a key point. Everything people say, oh, it's a conspiracy. I'm giving a conspiracy reality presentation, not a conspiracy theory. Notice everything I'm saying today: British Medical Journal, the journal Nature, CNN, Bloomberg, the BBC. Everything I'm citing you is mainstream sources. I'm not giving you anonymous sources, secret documents. I'm not giving you some blogger in the basement at Greenpeace. I'm presenting to you what our ruling class, governing elite, corporate government collusion is presenting. Everything is mainstream here. So just notice all the sources. This is BBC, A Future Planet. In 2023, can living ultra-low carbon lifestyles really be achieved by personal choice alone? We need to cut our carbon footprints. The idea is they're promoting mandates and forced behavior. It's no longer a choice, and we'll get to that a little later. BBC, I think this is 2023. This is 2021 up here. What would a flying free world look like? Well, here it is. Fresh fruits and veggies would disappear from supermarkets in winter. You know, the Three Stooges did a skit once where they were about to be hung in jail for crimes, and they said, well, any final requests? Yes, we'd like strawberries. Well, strawberries won't be in season for 6 months. We'll wait, and they tried to get away from the hangman. Well, that's the future, because as they cut back on all the transport, we'll only be able to eat fruit when it's in season. Huge adjustments in the supply chain. And this is the BBC 2022. It's about when, not if, that we'd have a flying free world. This is what, again, I'm not giving you some absurd, I got a secret document from the UN, I can't tell you this. This is the BBC saying the quiet part out loud. You will go nowhere and be happy. Business Insider, electric vehicles won't save us. We need to get rid of cars completely. Boris Johnson, UK Transport Minister. This is 2021. Owning a car is outdated 20th century thinking. You all a bunch of white male racists who own cars. That's so 20th century. Shared mobility to cut emissions. That's what the future is. They're being open about it. They don't want you to have an EV. They want you to have no car, all public transit. World Bank, Nicholas Stern floated the idea of the end of conventional vehicle sales. World Bank is a major global finance. If they're telling automakers, hey, we're going to restrict funding to even build a gas-powered car, no one voted for that, but hey, it's corporate government collusion. Floats the end of conventional, urges clarity on timescales. These are the major financiers of the world behind banning gas-powered cars. German transport minister, now he may have been being facetious, showing the absurdity, but this is a real concept. Threatens indefinite driving bans on weekends in order to meet the binding climate targets. Think about that. Well, you have to give up driving because we have a climate target. We have to meet net zero. Sorry, just Saturday and Sunday. You can drive the rest of the week. That's all it is. Again, look at the source, Politico. It's not like I got a secret document. Everything's out in the open. I need to emphasize that. They're screaming at us exactly what they want to do, how they want to do it. They're giving us timetables. They're playing out every scenario. And when I say they, I'm talking about corporate media. I'm talking about the entire peer review journal system, from climate to public health. I'm talking about every major organization, from the World Economic Forum to the UN, all these international NGOs, all the quiet parts out loud. New York Times, California asked electric vehicle owners to limit charging. This was about 3 days after they announced the ban on gas-powered cars, going all EV. He's Newsom, Governor Newsom, saving the planet. Oh, wait, you can't charge the cars right now because we don't have energy. This was a Babylon Bee, a spoof satire headline. State with no electricity orders everyone to drive cars that run on electricity. It's not even funny, because that's the goal, is to get you not to drive cars. That's why it works. By the way, Biden's national power charging grid for EVs in the United States, imagine the next, when Biden was elected, there were pushes in his administration to do a ban on interstate travel as part of the COVID lockdown to stop the spread. Imagine if we had gas-powered cars banned, international EV charging. You don't have to issue a stay-at-home order. You just turn off the national charging grid for the EVs, and people are going to be radically reducing their options to charge their EVs if you're depending on one source, the federal government. The whole idea of banning petrol cars is borrowing from Cuba, East Germany. Cuba has all the 1950s cars, pre-Castro revolution. And in the case of East Germany, the crappy East German Trabant, where people on waiting lists 5, 10 plus years for a crappy car. The government of East Germany actually said you can only buy one car, the crappy East German Trabant. And what is the once free West doing? You can only buy one car, an EV, as we ban all their competition. Corporate government collusion. Australian bank announces it will ban loans for petrol or diesel cars in order to fight climate change. If you didn't vote for this, you don't have to vote for it. There was no legislator voting for gas-powered car bans. They're just corporate government collusion behind the scenes. The banks will help the automakers, who will help the government bureaucrats, who help the climate activists, who help the international NGOs. And you all had no say in any of this. If you ban the cars and gas stations, you can create gas shortages. California cities banning the creation of new gas stations. Democrat-led Colorado bans new gas stations. Town of Louisville enacts emergency ban on new gas station. Seeks to make more permanent. So even if you own a gas-powered car, you can't get a loan for it. The automakers won't be able to make it. It's been banned. You're going to have trouble finding gas stations. They're coming after the availability of gas stations selling gas, petrol. Who wins in all this? Well, I think Donald Trump may have been right. Global warming was created to benefit China and make them the sole superpower. Say goodbye to the U.S. car market. Cheap EVs are coming. Chinese EVs threaten legacy automakers from GM to VW. Again, every one of these mainstream sources. The Autoblog, if the battery is the key to EV future, China's got a lock on it. China is going to be the world's #1 global automaker if we go through with this ban on gas-powered cars. It's completely bonkers. Can you translate that to German? Okay. Great food reset. Slashing farm emissions critical to fighting climate change. Oh, yes. In the United States, they're coming after American farmers finally with the net zero agenda. John Kerry, the climate envoy, just stepped down. Irish government seeking to sacrifice 200,000 cows to reach net zero goals. By the way, this bird flu, H1N1, it's amazing, isn't it, how public health wants to monitor people, have mandatory tests of farmers and everyone else who might be in contact with bird flu. Australia, they're already talking about culling. Millions of farm animals are going to be possible to stop the spread of this public health threat. Isn't it amazing how bird flu goal of the bird flu solution is the same as the climate solution, is wiping out livestock and creating meat shortages? Fascinating. So this is the Irish government getting rid of cows. China buying up American farms. The current trend is leading to the creation of a Chinese-owned agricultural land monopoly. Notice the source, Politico. Well, don't worry about it, because a homegrown American has beat China. NBC News reported Bill Gates is the #1 single largest farmland owner in the United States. And I love this. This is what you call award-winning journalism. Bill Gates is not the one in overalls. He's not the one on the tractor. He's the landlord here. NBC News raising the specter of farmers giving up their land because they can't afford the climate compliance costs, and billionaires like Bill Gates sweep in, buy the land, and guess what? The farmer may be able to stay on the land he's lived for generations, but he'll no longer own it. He'll be paying rent to Bill Gates. And that's what you call the neo-feudalism coming, back to the feudal system where you have the lord of the manor and the peasants paying for their rent to live there. So why does Bill Gates, and by the way, it's Jeff Bezos buying up farmland as well. He's very close to Bill Gates. Why does Bill Gates want to buy farmland? Well, he told MIT Technology Review he wants to shift the entire Western world, and this is Europe, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, US, to synthetic beef. So synthetic beef can be potentially the vegetable oil processed Impossible Burger, but what Bill Gates really likes is the lab-grown meat in steel vats. Jeff Bezos is involved. Richard Branson's involved. Gee, all the major billionaires. Just so everyone knows, this is CNBC, Fortune magazine. I'm not, again, no anonymous sources here. Everything I'm saying is out in the open. Test tube steak. Look at Bill Gates. I think we should all move to 100% synthetic beef. The behavior, we can sort the change of behavior and use regulation to totally shift the demand. Use regulation to shift the demand. In other words, make real meat from actual animal agriculture completely rationed and too expensive for people to buy. That's how you shift the demand. What is lab-grown meat? You need to understand this is stem cells from a cow, sheep, pig mixed with fetal blood, put into a petri dish, then into a steel vat. Then it goes through a process that looks like McDonald's chicken nuggets, pink slime, processed, and it's printed on a 3D printer in the end. Hold on one sec. There it is. 3D printed steak, great World Economic, fake meat from a printer. Machines can print up to 6 kilograms of meat an hour. What's for dinner tonight? Oh, I'm printing you up a juicy tenderloin. It'll be ready in a few minutes. Let me check the printer. It should be ready here in a minute. And then these are mainstream sources. World Economic Forum. This is an Israeli paper reporting that. But here's the funny thing as an aside. Lab-grown meat is approved for the first time in 2023 for human consumption in the US. I think it's also been approved in EU. I can't remember. Has lab-grown meat been approved here? Does anyone know? I know in the US they approved lab-grown chicken, and that's a lot of it has to do with who's behind it. 3 billionaires, Richard Branson, Jeff Bezos, and Bill Gates. And guess what? When you have billionaires behind something, usually federal regulators and agencies go along. Isn't that amazing? Lab-grown meat, according to the New Scientist, lab-grown meat can be 25 times worse than climate than beef. And there's a whole study in these, again, mainstream journals. Even if you were actually using this as a justification to save the planet, lab-grown meat is 25 times worse, not environmentally friendly. UN, this is Journal Nature, eat less meat. UN climate change report calls for a change to human diet. What an accurate headline would be, UN climate change report calls for rationing, restricting meat to force people to eat bugs and lab-grown meat. Americans may have to say goodbye to steaks and burger as beef costs rise. Remember, it's not like, oh darn, our policies cause meat to go up. It's like, yes, they're working as intended. You've got to flip the whole narrative. Everything you've been told is a lie, at least ostensibly told. You need to know what they're really doing. Europeans now allowed to eat cricket powder and small whalworms. You are allowed. Finally, there's no government that's going to stop you from eating cricket powder. In fact, the menu today, no, I'm just kidding. Okay. Italy bans insect flour from its pasta. Giorgia Meloni, who, by the way, is a big winner in these EU elections, the Italian prime minister, said there'll be no bugs in Italian pasta. And let's hope she sticks to that. Italy also did a ban on lab-grown meat to protect its food heritage. CNN, drink up. Cockroach milk is the protein drink you didn't know you've been missing. I didn't know it. How many of you knew that, okay? This is great. The UK Times. Ants add caramel nutty flavors to dishes. If you're looking for those subtle nuance of flavor of food, ants. There's your answer right there. Why would you need chocolate sprinkles? Ants are high in protein and they're free, basically. The UK Independent. Could beer made from urine help water shortages? There you go. Yes, hey, you have a water crisis? Just piss in a bottle and drink it. Why even go through the beer? Just drink it. Scientific American. Again, I'm not giving you off sources. Eating too much protein makes pee, urine, a problem pollutant in the U.S. Pee is a problem and can contribute to warming. We're eating too much meat, which has too much nitrogen, which then creates nitrous oxide in our urine, which is a warming agent, which apparently is causing the climate crisis. They want to stop you from peeing. You will own nothing, but someone else will own it. We've all seen that. Okay. First, they came for energy, then your cars, then your meat, then your freedom of movement. Now, houses pose more danger to climate than vehicles. Well, if they want to ban car ownership, imagine what they want to do in the housing sector. Rethinking home ownership. They'll tell us, UCLA, mainstream academic, Key and Gaw, urban planning. Given the scope and scale, we need another kind of escape route, away from the ideologies of ownership and property and toward a collective, healthy, and just. Rethink home ownership. They're saying the quiet parts out loud. Coming for your water. I just posted this. This is fascinating. Her name is Elizabeth Nixon. She was a UK Guardian reporter, I think Life magazine, left of center establishment reporter who's now been red-pilled and really tearing apart this agenda she once championed. You will have a daily, this is based on UN and the United States EPA regulations. I just posted it this week. You will have a daily water allowance, 1 shower a day, no lawns, limited gardens. The state will meter it all. The edicts give government control of every runoff, ditch, and puddle. You're saying, how could this happen? Well, look at here. Wall Street is behind this. They're turning the natural asset, they're called natural asset, what is that? I can't remember the exact, natural asset companies where you can invest in these natural land grabs, and it'll be essentially, we're using the free market to protect the environment. No, they're using Wall Street and equity asset firms to literally take away available land for private citizens. Again, corporate government collusion. This is a whole new thing. I'm just starting to cover this water issue because it's a massive addition to everything else they're trying to do. It's a hydra. They just keep coming at you. So I mentioned earlier about climate change. Right before the UN conference in Dubai, and by the way, Craig Rucker has probably been to more, but I've been to 19 out of the last 21 UN climate summits, and we're going to Azerbaijan this November. But 100 medical journals declared that climate change was they want the World Health Organization to declare climate change a public health threat and merge it. This is 2021. A doctor in Canada, head of the emergency room, diagnosed the first medically diagnosed patient in the world of suffering from climate change, a woman with heat stroke. And this is a new case. This is, again, Canadian Times columnist, major paper. Says it's time for doctors to look at the underlying cause of medical conditions. And of course, that is, you get on your chart, what do you have? Climate change. You can also have it listed on your death certificate. Academics, Australia National University. Climate change is a killer, but we don't acknowledge it on death certificates. So you can be diagnosed with climate change, and you can have it on your death certificate. It's climate change death tolls. Did you die with climate change, or did you die because of climate change? It's going to be like the whole COVID debate. Climate reality, of course, destroys a 99% drop in deaths, but they still want you to be listed on your death certificate and doctors to diagnose you. The wacky world of climate. All right. Cars, appliances, pizza ovens, homegrown food. This is UK Telegraph. The carbon footprint of homegrown food is worse than food grown conventionally. You have a backyard garden, you're killing the planet. Whoa, they don't want you to be self-reliant. They want you to be reliant on bugs and lab-grown meat. Washington Post, you like indoor houseplants? I'm noticing all the plants in this building here. They come with a cost to the planet. All of these plants here are destroying. It's incredible how they come up with this. It's Washington Post. Humans are fueling global warming by just breathing. This is a peer-reviewed journal study, measurements of methane, and it gets worse. They found in this study that Africans emit more warming agents in their breath than Asians. And are you ready for this? Women have more warming agents in their breath than men. Women have a lot more hot air than men. That's science. You can't argue with science. But remember, they want to regulate carbon dioxide as a pollutant, as similar to asbestos. So they actually have studies saying that humans are driving global warming through human breath. This is the real issue. This gets into population control. Okay, this is a new paper this year. Cass Sustein, Harvard University, Harvard Kennedy School. So again, I'm not getting a Sierra Club blogger and making a, exploiting this. No, all Harvard University. Regulators should value non-human animals. They seek to estimate the number of dog years saved by a regulation. This is actually very confusing. It takes a while to figure it out. But some regulations do not only reduce human deaths, injuries, they also protect non-human animals. They're not specifically talking about dogs, but they want to have an animal and a nature cost to all regulations. Well, how many, and he's using the phrase dog years so people understand it, but how many what's the animal impact of this? Well, this would be about 38 dog years in this. Well, that's too, we have to fix that. They want you to start, instead of just thinking about environmental impacts, now you're going to have a species impact. It's just another way to make society come to a halt, and we all listen to the unelected bureaucrats. Okay. If nothing will get you to support net zero, Green New Deal, maybe this will. This is the UK Independent. Climate change is hitting vulnerable Indonesian trans sex workers. This reporter who wrote this article, Leo Galoth, this was for Reuters News. UK, again, all mainstream sources. This is guaranteed to win a journalistic award. They got climate change in there. They got a developing world country, the underdog. You have transgenderism in there, and you have prostitutes in there. That is like hitting every bell. Ding, 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 ding. They're going to win multiple awards, financial awards. It's phenomenal. I think we should congratulate that reporter. It's incredible. 93% of the Indonesian transgender sex workers saw decreased income during the rainy season caused by climate change. I think we're going to need a Save the Transgender Fund, transgender prostitute fund. Washington Post Climate Solutions Reporter. That's a real thing. The Washington Post has a Climate Solutions Reporter. Why you should embrace using cold water almost all the time for your wash, for your showers, cold showers. They're telling you what's coming down the pike. My favorite, human hair clothing. Washington Post. This unexpected material might be your next sweater. They tout recycling human hair into clothes as a climate solution. Weaving human hair keeps hair out of landfills and incinerators where it releases greenhouse gases. And this is my favorite. A startup company dubbed the human material they want to turn hair swept off barbershop floors into fabric for clothes, curtains, and furniture. So imagine now kids, instead of volunteering to clean up, trash on the side of the road or different projects for recycling, they're going to send kids off to barber shops to sweep up the hair on the floor so we can save the planet by wearing hair shirts. This is incredible. Washington Post Climate Solutions Reporter. They came for your gas car, your recycled hair, and now your lunch. UK Daily Mail, based on a study. Cooking a grilled cheese sandwich is more toxic than breathing in car exhaust fumes because of gas stoves. So now you know that a grilled cheese sandwich is more toxic than your car emissions. It's science. You are the carbon they want to eliminate. Earth has 8 billion humans. This man wishes there were none. Notice the source. I got to say it, New York Times. This is New York Times Magazine. I wouldn't give you some obscure thing. I mean, they're screaming what they want to do. The next target's Vogue magazine. Is having a baby pure environmental vandalism? How many people have engaged in environmental vandalism here with having kids? All right, you're the true terrorist here. If you do not have kids, this is true. Notice the source, New York Times. There has never been a better time to be short. Mate with shorter people. You want to save the planet? Marry a midget. All right, is that politically correct? Marry a dwarf. What's the word? I don't know. For a greener planet. The planet by shrinking the needs of subsequent generations. This is actually the New York Times. It's a screenshot. When you mate with shorter people, you're saving the planet. This is insane. You no longer have a choice. That's John Kerry's daughter. At the World Economic Forum this year, we must accept there's no other way forward, none, than to end fossil fuels. There is no longer a choice. Her words. That's what they want you to think. F that. We have a choice. New York Times. Don't go down the rabbit hole of critical thinking. Willie Soon, I know, is a critical thinker. Will Happer, John Clauser, all these scientists, they have it wrong. You cannot be a critical thinker in today's world because it doesn't help fight misinformation. This is the New York Times. Forbes magazines, don't do your own research when it comes to science. Rely on the United Nations. Rely on the World Health Organization. This is the way we have to go forward. Don't do your own research. Questioning authority has become too much of a good thing, and it's killing people. You question a government bureaucrat, you're a murderer. Time magazine, what we should do is just worship the earth. The case for making Earth Day a religious holiday. This is last year at Earth Day. Actual article. Slate magazine, it's time to give up on facts and lay them down in favor of a more useful weapon, emotions. That's the way forward. Forget data, James Taylor, all these charts. I want to see the emotion next time, James. That's what matters. Slate magazine says, give up on the facts. Okay, ending here. Milton Friedman, free societies, the kind we've been lucky enough to experience the last 200 years, are a rare exception in human history. Most people, most of history, have lived in tyranny and misery. We truly, everyone here in the West has to fight back against this agenda because we are staring down the barrel of human history, and it's not a pretty picture. We are an anomaly right now in the 20th century with the 21st century with the free Western nations and developing nations. We cannot go back. We cannot allow these agendas to hijack us. So if you're speechless, that's because climate change has made you speechless. It's accelerating language loss, according to Babel magazine and The Conversation. So with that, I thank you very much, and I'll take questions. I just finished. I'm probably out of time, but thank you very much.